Next day, in the evening, at the dining table. Eating at the same table with him is a nightmare, as his gaze is even following the food traveling down my throat. When I gave him a "do you want from me" look, he simply smiled while staring at me and supported his face with his hands. I faked a cough to warn him that I might choke if he did not take his gaze off of me this instant, but instead, looking away from me, he handed me a glass of water and continued staring at me, as if I am the most interesting thing he has ever laid his eyes upon. He was so lost that he didn't even touch his food. I let out a huge sigh, dropped my chopsticks into the bowl, and turned my face to face him. Until when are you planning to keep staring at me? I rested her face on her hand as well and maintained a strong eye contact with him. Until you marry me. Smiled and nodded his head twice. So you won't stare at me after our marriage. Tilted her head while frowning and spoke whatever comes to her mouth. Is that a yes? I sparkled with the gleaming stars of hope. Yourself, muttered under her breath, slumped back in her chair and began eating again. I would need your help in that. Unbothered. I snapped my head to scowl at him, and he almost quickly stood up from his chair. Let me bring juice for you. He went to the kitchen and returned with the juice, which he handed me. What are you, my personal mate? Trying to pick up a fight with him. Soon to be a caring husband. Sat on his chair again. In your dreams. Rolls her eyes and was about to drink juice, but stopped and put the glass back on the table. My dreams come true, told her seriously. I'll not marry you. Never. Shook her head, trying to deny the possibilities. You will. You definitely will. Spoke with tremendous amount of confidence. Vine was trying to provoke him out of habit, but her plan backfired on her, and now she was the one who was getting frustrated. To contain her fury, she gulped the juice all at once and spoke. And why do you think I'll marry you? If not me, then who? He raised his brow and smirked. Vine paused for a moment and reflected. Can she even imagine being close to anybody other than him? This notion sent shivers down her spine, but she shrugged it off. Why the hell do you sound so confident? It's not like you can predict the future. Suddenly felt dizzy, but she tried not to pay attention to the world which was now seemed to be spinning around her. And what if I say I can? Then tell me what I am about to do next. She rubbed her temples and tried to open her eyes to continue the conversation. You? You will fall asleep within a few seconds. Patted her head and caressed her cheek slightly. Vine gazed at him, perplexed, but then she felt her head drop on its own. She tried to control herself, but sleep for now, love. You must be tired from fighting for so long. It's time to take a little rest. Supported her face in his hands until she completely passed out. Tang looked at the glass of juice he had made her drink and sighed. I hope you get a good rest. By the time you wake up, either everything will be okay and we will continue our story, or I will not be here anymore. You will enjoy the ending where I am no longer with you, right? Sadly chuckled, lifted her in his arms and walked towards his room. He gently laid her on the bed, covered her with blanket properly, and sat beside her to cherish this moment, when she is peaceful and he can stare at her as much as he wants, without annoying her, falling for her over and over again. I felt this fear of dying after a long time. I'm scared. What if I die without living my dream to be with you? What if I don't return? Or what if I do and you're not there? You have got this mafia wrapped around your little finger, and you don't even look in my direction. Chuckled. He leaned closer and was about to peck her temple, but paused and stared at her closely. I should take a goodbye gift. I deserve it, don't I? Whispered slowly. He leaned forward and gently pecked her lips, barely touching them with his, but it was enough to send his body in a fit of shivers, chills, and goosebumps. He leaned back and gazed at her with glistening eyes. I shouldn't have done that without your consent, right? Apologetic expressions. But what can I do? I'm a bad guy after all. But I promise, next time, I'll kiss you after taking your permission, and I'll come back in the hope of that next time. Smiling while softly caressing the back of her palm with his thumb, he kept looking at her with dreamy eyes, as if he wanted to make the best out of this moment. His phone rang, signaling the time of departure, and he left her hand. He sighed and stood up to leave, but turned around to look at her one last time. I'm leaving my feelings with you. Please take care of them, whispered. As he began taking steps towards the door, his expressions hardened and darkness clouded his senses. And just like that, he left her. On the way, inside the jeep, Jimin stopped the jeep in the dark, dense forest, where even the moonlight failed to reach. He looked to his side and spoke. Any last words? Shoot blindly if you see any suspicious activity or behavior, even if it's your own man, even if it's me, coldly stated. Okay, but what about the military involvement at the port? They know that these cargo ships are mine, and I can visit whenever I want to check the activity. And Jungkook will handle the rest, in the backseat. Don't worry about that. But we can't alert our enemies. If they got to know about your arrival, they'll run away. That's why I'll only reveal myself when needed. Okay then, see you there. I did Taehyung's shoulder from the back and moved out. Jungkook exited the jeep and sat in the other one. Jimin did the same because they could not risk being in the same vehicle. If something happens to one of them, the others will carry out the mission. As per Taehyung's order, no matter what happens, the show must go on. Location: Incheon Seaport, located near Seoul. In the utter darkness, when the sound of sea waves clashing to the shore and some men loading the cargo ships for exporting goods out of South Korea could be heard, Taehyung, Jimin, Jungkook and their men hid themselves in different locations, in between massive infrastructures. Waiting for the start of any malicious activities from the enemy side and the right time to bless them with the gift of their death. Nothing unusual occurred for a while. Everyone was wearing night vision goggles so they could signal one another and attack in the dark. After 20 minutes, they silently shifted positions, and Taeyang hid behind a storage facility wall. He was about to change his position again, but halted when he heard a sob. He paused and placed his ear on the door to hear properly, and he was right. It seemed like someone was inside, crying. He signaled his men, and Jungkook also came to him, hiding behind the buildings. Taeyang signaled him to listen, and Jungkook's eyes widened as he also heard the same thing. Should we attack? Whispering. Taeyang shook his head and signaled his men again to hide themselves. He dragged Jungkook along and told him to wait a while. Jungkook looked at him confused, but his uncertainty changed into astonishment when some men walked towards the storage facility and started opening locks of the door. They are your men whom you gave the duty at the port, right? Whispered. Nodded his head slightly and whispered back, betrayers. Those men opened the door and walked inside. Right at that moment, Taeyang signaled his men to follow him inside the building. Upon entering secretly, they got shocked to witness the ongoing situation. There were many women, girls, young boys, and children, all up and stacked together like toys. Some were unconscious, while a few were awake and terrified. Their mouths were taped, so only small sobs and whimpers were echoing in the room. These people were there for human, and Taeyang's own men and ships were involved without his consent and knowledge. Shut your mouths, otherwise I won't hesitate to kill you. Suddenly, a shot rang out, sharp and deafening in the stillness of the night. Bullet went across that man's skull, making his lifeless body fall down with a thud as his soul departed. Sobs and whimpers stopped for a while in fear, as no one knew who had killed whom. Jungkook looked at Taeyang and then at his from which little smoke was emitting. Taking this as a signal, he ordered his men to attack, and before the betrayers could comprehend the situation, bullets coming from the dark passed through their bodies and took out their souls alone. As their few minutes ended, they started helping the captive individuals out, but this time their enemies got alert, and an open erupted. Jimin and his men quickly started relocating the victims to a safer location, while Taeyang, Jungkook and their men covered him. Their enemies even started using small in Taeyang's direction, which resulted in him collapsing lifelessly on the ground while bleeding profusely. Their main target was to demolish Taeyang in order to take over the situation, as they knew as long as Taeyang is alive, victory is bound to become his. Upon witnessing Taeyang's condition, Jungkook became the apocalypse that shattered upon his enemies. Jimin and his men were finished moving the victims to their vehicles. But when Jimin spotted Taeyang on the ground, he dashed towards him, while crushing the army of rivals in his way. Knelt in front of Taeyang's body and shook him. Wake up! Taeyang remained motionless, which increased Jimin's anxiety. It's not the time to rest. Wake the up! Yelled in anger and panic. Taeyang stared slightly and eventually opened his eyes, causing Jimin to sigh in relief. Take coughed blood, them to a safer location, under your supervision. tried to sit up. Supported Taeyang to stand on his feet amidst of chaos. What about you? I'm not dying before ending this. Shook his head to regain his focus and stretched his neck to get ready to attack again. Jimin smirked and nodded before rushing in the direction of the trucks to complete the set task. Jungkook also breathed a sigh of relief as he saw Taeyang get back on his feet and fight with his full strength. The fight ended pretty soon as Taeyang and Jungkook completely took control of the situation and sent their troops to inspect surrounding areas and cargo ships. Sir, everything is clear. No survivor in sight. Reported about enemies. Jungkook took a deep breath and looked at Taeyang, feeling proud. That was one hell of a workout. Taeyang was about to answer, but you are under arrest. Their eyes widened, and they turned back to witness another shock. Weakly whispered.